You know, in fact, there are multiple reasons why welfare doesn't work. There's so many, we don't have time to go, but some of them is one, it breaks up the family, it disincentivizes you, it doesn't give you any incentive to leave your conditions, it hurts people, it's a demotivator. There's so many, in fact, kids who are on welfare, if a child is on welfare for 5 years, for just 3 months a year, their IQ drops by 20%.
Well, I don't know where those statistics come from.
They're on the book.
Oh, they're in the book. Well, I'll have to look at the book to find that.
But the point being that, so now they're attacking, rather than saying, let's discuss the issue, how do we solve the problem, they're going to attack me for being mean-spirited.
Okay.
So that's a straw man.
So they create a false image or a false identity and
They attack that.
Attack that.
Yeah.
And attach your name, your person to that, so to just discredit you before there's even a logical conversation that's vetted out.
It's got nothing to do with my argument.
Okay, because the facts aren't, because as you said, the facts can't be vetted out, and then the logic.
Yes.
So they're attacking so the strong man is their vehicle for avoiding logic and fact.
And you see this all the time. Now, you see it on both sides.
Yes.
We
If
see it
you're
on both
talking
sides.
politics,
Yeah,
definitely.
see it on both sides.
Republicans and Democrats.
And everybody does it. We need to educate everybody.
Right.
You know, I want to educate liberals and conservatives because I believe that what we want is the truth and education and knowledge and understanding.
Yes.
We're going to solve that problem.
Yes, I agree. So what biblical principles then would result in Americans being mutually prosperous with such a diverse populace as that's in America?
Well, I think we should start with our rights.
Okay.
Let's look at the Constitution. The Constitution says that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. So when you ask somebody, where do our rights come from? Many of them will say our rights come from the state. But the point is, if the state gives you rights, the state can, guess what? Take it away.
That makes sense.
But if you're endowed by inalienable rights, now inalienable rights is different. Sometimes they use the words unalienable. Jefferson had both in his earlier versions of his draft. But if you look at the concept of inalienable rights or unalienable right, that is, you have a right. I can violate your right, but you always had the right. I've just prevented you from experiencing it.
So is it inherited?
It's not inherited.
Innate?
It's innate.
Okay.
God has given, well, it's innate in the sense that God gave you the rights.
Okay.
And so only God can take it away. If the state gives you, the government gives you right, the government gives you away. And look what happened in Hitler's Germany, right? Hitler said, we give you rights, so we're going to take it away from the Jews.
I see.
But the Jews always had the rights.
I see.
Right? Same with African American slaves, right? They always had the right to freedom, life, liberty. It was just that the state took it away from them. Right? So it always belonged to them, but the state prevented them from exercising that right.
And that's just one example.
That's just one example.
And
Now,
historically,
Yeah.
Germany and I suppose Russia, you could
Russia,
Soviet Union,
America.
America.
You know?
Let's not forget where we're living.
Yeah, and now what's interesting is most communist countries say the state gives you your rights. It's only in America that, at least America was the first example of it, and other states have copied that, but they don't really exercise that. Now we have
So
to
it's unique to America.
Yes.
It's our heritage.
It's our heritage. And now when you understand that the government, so now the question is, what is the government? If the government doesn't give you rights, what is the role of the government? And what's the Declaration of Independence say? Governments are instituted amongst men to what? To protect those rights.
Right.
The only job of the government is to protect my rights.
So you mentioned the Declaration of Independence, and I think that's very interesting because I've heard that where we err many times politically and lawfully is that we separate the Declaration of Independence
From the Constitution.
from the Constitution.
Yes.
And the Declaration of Independence provides the basis of intent
It's the
or
the
interpretation.
rational and logical concepts behind what is exercised, what is realized in the Constitution.
And it ties us to history, lessons learned.
Yes.
And I know in manufacturing environments, they're always talking about when you're designing and building something of value,
Right.
you want to correct any problems that could subsist,
Right.
that could be repeated.
Yep.
So you take those lessons learned and you try to correct for them, so when you come around to the next phase of a build, you want to implement
Yes.
those lessons learned.
Exactly.
And from that perspective, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, and there's another important part too.
Nation building.
The Declaration of Independence was written in 1776. The Constitution, as we know it, didn't come till a few years later.
Yes.
Because we first had the Continental Congress before we had the Constitution as we know it. You know,
Yes.
and there really were like 7 presidents before Washington, George Washington, but they were not presidents under this Constitution. They were presidents under the old constitutions.
Okay,
So Washington was the first real president under this Constitution.
I see.
Now, and those presidents didn't serve for 7 years. I think they served for 1 or 2 years or something like that. So Washington was the first president under the new Constitution. Now, what's interesting about that is that new Constitution realized everything that the Declaration said. So if somebody comes and says, well, the Declaration of Independence is not part of our law, because the Constitution is, they would be making a very big mistake. Because the Constitution doesn't tell you where you get your rights from. It just says, these are the rights. Right?
These are
So
the rights.
if somebody comes up and says, here are your rights, but you don't know where they come from, then the state gave you the rights.
Right.
And in which case the Constitution could come around, we could go and make an amendment to the Constitution that says, you have no rights anymore, white man. You're right? Or brown man, or black man, or whatever.
Right.
But the Declaration made it very clear that, yes, you have rights regardless of whether the state gives you rights because they came from God. And only God can take away your rights.
And there were states who didn't fully recognize that,
Right?
and they were defining what that was.
They were defining that human beings, African American slaves, were not human.
And so that had to be vetted out in the course of history and in politics
Yep.
to see what innate rights
Yep.
that men were owed,
Exactly.
and by God.
Now, now let's get back to the mutually prosperous part of it. Here's the problem. Most people don't understand what a right is. For instance, today we're in this big healthcare thing, right?
Correct.
Obama has just told us that healthcare should be a right. In fact, back in the FDR days, FDR said everybody should have the right. In fact, I believe it was FDR or Woodrow Wilson or somebody wanted to, I think Woodrow Wilson wanted to make a second Bill of Rights that said you have the right to an education, you have the right to health care, you have the right to a house, you have the right to a good paying job. Now here's the problem.
Correct.
They had misunderstood the difference between rights and goods. See, a good is the product of somebody's labor. You have the right to your own goods, but you do not have the right to my goods.
I see.
Right? Now, the minute I go to somebody, let's say I take a third person, I say, you have the right to a good. But that good is not goods produced by you, it's produced by you, Jason. Guess what? At some point, I'm going to have to enslave you to guarantee you and guarantee person number 3 an ample quantity of that product, that good that you're producing. So if I say healthcare is a right, guess what? I'm going to have to enslave the doctors, or enslave the population through taxes to make sure that those people who want free healthcare gets free healthcare. Healthcare is a good. If I say a house is a right, well, guess what? I'm going to have to enslave house builders or enough people to pay the taxes to provide that good. And the minute we confuse goods with rights, we are violating the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.